Keir Starmer's G20 disaster might just be the political unravelling of the year. From the grand stage of Rio de Janeiro, where he boldly proclaimed that the world is safer when leaders talk, to the fiery domestic backlash awaiting him at home, Starmer is caught in a political hurricane. His defence of a national insurance raid has provoked a full-scale revolt among supermarkets, and his comments on inheritance tax reforms have left Britain's farmers feeling betrayed. But that's not all. His global diplomacy is raising eyebrows too, as critics accuse him of soft-pedalling on China while hardline policies at home alienate voters. Folks, this is political theatre at its finest: international grandstanding, economic upheaval, and emotional appeals from the heartland. So buckle up, we're diving into a sprawling saga of scandal, rebellion, and political brinkmanship that you won't want to miss.
The Prime Ministers of Italy and Japan, I discussed how we can take forward our global combat air programme to build the next generation of fighter jets, boost our industrial capacity, and strengthen our national security for the long term. We looked ahead to the establishment of a new GCAP headquarters, which is due to be based in the UK, creating hundreds of jobs. Finally, I met with President Xi. This was the first leader-level meeting between the United Kingdom and China for 6 years. We had frank, constructive, and pragmatic discussions. As G20 economies and permanent members of the Security Council, and at a time of huge volatility, I think we both recognised the importance of engagement. I was clear that we will always act in our national interest, and that we have a shared responsibility to work together on challenges like climate change and delivering growth. So we agreed to a new dialogue on those issues. Of course, there will continue to be areas where we don't agree, including their support for Russia's war and on Hong Kong. But here too, we need to engage. The lesson of history is that the more we're able to deal with problems, the world is safer when leaders talk.
Standing under the spotlight at the G20 in Rio de Janeiro, Keir Starmer delivered a speech aimed at solidifying his statesman-like credentials. He struck a hopeful tone, calling for global cooperation on climate change and economic growth. "We had frank, constructive and pragmatic discussions," he stated, alluding to delicate talks with China on Russia's war in Ukraine and human rights issues in Hong Kong. But as Starmer celebrated engagement, critics pointed out his hypocrisy. While talking up unity abroad, his controversial national insurance hike has fractured trust with key domestic industries, including retail and farming. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch wasted no time pouncing on his perceived double standards. Starmer wants to look like a global leader, but at home, his policies are strangling businesses and killing jobs, she fired during a heated interview. Back in Britain, Starmer faces an economic mutiny. The £25.7 billion national insurance hike has thrown major retailers like Tesco, Sainsbury's and Asda into an uproar. In an unprecedented move, 70 retail giants co-signed a damning open letter to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, warning of devastating consequences. They claim the increased tax burden, combined with minimum wage hikes and packaging levies, will cost the retail industry over £7 billion annually, leading to price inflation and potentially 50,000 job losses. Sainsbury's CEO Simon Roberts described the measures as unsustainable, while Asda announced it would shoulder an extra £100 million in costs. Even the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, chimed in, expressing concerns about the policy's impact on employment levels. "I think there's a real risk we're underestimating the fallout here," Bailey said during a financial committee hearing. Starmer, however, defended the move with unwavering resolve. "The previous Tory government refused to make tough decisions, and that's why we're in this mess," he declared, casting the tax hike as necessary to fund public services. But critics on both sides of the aisle are calling it a sledgehammer to the economy. While supermarkets battle labour over taxes, Britain's rural heartland is erupting over inheritance tax reforms. Labour's proposed changes would impose a 20% tax on agricultural assets above £1 million, a move that has sparked outrage among farming families. The emotional centrepiece of this revolt is Henry Bailey, a 12-year-old farmer who became a national symbol of resistance after his tearful GB News interview. "It feels like they're stealing my dream," Henry lamented, adding, "This will make it impossible for my generation to carry on our family farms." Starmer's response was seen as dismissive, as he insisted the £3 million threshold would protect most farms. But his reassurances have done little to appease protesters gathering in London for the largest farmers' demonstration in years. "Keir Starmer doesn't understand rural Britain," fumed one protester, adding, "We need policies that sustain farming, not strangle it." Critics argue the reforms fail to account for the ballooning value of agricultural assets, leaving many farmers with impossible tax burdens. Labour isn't just battling business and farmers, it's now at odds with unions too. GMB officer Nadine Houghton dismissed the retail sector's concerns as pathetic, calling out multi-billion-pound companies for resisting higher taxes to support public services. But the harsh rhetoric has widened the rift between Labour and private industry. Meanwhile, Tory MPs and business leaders are framing Starmer as a wolf in sheep's clothing. "He pretends to care about businesses and farmers, but his actions show otherwise," said Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg in a fiery Parliament speech. At the same time, Starmer's G20 diplomacy is under fire. Some accuse him of appeasing China after his lukewarm comments on human rights abuses in Hong Kong and his refusal to confront Beijing more aggressively on Ukraine. Critics say Starmer's foreign policy lacks teeth, undermining his attempts to look like a global leader. With rebellion brewing on multiple fronts, Starmer's approval ratings are taking a hit. Polls suggest public confidence in his economic policies has dropped by 15 points in recent weeks. Yet, his team insists they're sticking to their guns. The stakes couldn't be higher. Labour's leadership must now decide whether to soften its stance on the inheritance tax reforms and national insurance hike, or risk alienating key voter blocs, including rural communities and middle-class business owners. Meanwhile, Starmer's attempt to project strength on the global stage is being overshadowed by chaos at home. Can he hold the line and deliver on his promises, or will this storm of scandals mark the beginning of the end for Labour's momentum? Do you think Keir Starmer's leadership is faltering under the weight of these crises? Are his tax policies and inheritance reforms necessary sacrifices, or are they reckless moves that betray voters? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explosive updates on this unfolding political drama. This story is just heating up, and we're bringing you every twist and turn as it happens.